Chapter 18. Speechless. With Alice's vigilance, and her monetary incentive waving in the cabbie's face, we made it to the airport without undue delay. Giving her credit card another workout, she pocketed our tickets, thankful when I produced my passport. Passing through security, a growl came from Bella. "When was the last time you ate?" I asked, spying her hand massaging her stomach. I glared at Alice. My diminutive sister returned my leer.
"We were in a rush. Someone left their phone in Rio, and we couldn't get a hold of him," she teased carefully.
My jaw tightened at the reminder, and I swallowed hard. The consequences of so many poor decisions on my part were far-reaching. This was just the tip of the iceberg. Hearing another low rumble from Bella, Alice sighed.
"Really, I tried to get her to eat on the plane. She's just as stubborn as you are."
"I wasn't hungry anyway," Bella said, taking a particular interest in the way her hands were locked together. "But dinner does sound good." I led Bella directly to a small airport restaurant and inspected the tiny restaurant's menu. When I had completely filled the table with plates of food, Alice excused herself and dashed off to the duty-free store, more to avoid the smell than to shop. Bella stared after her until Alice was out of sight, then picked up her fork. For not having eaten in nearly 24 hours, Bella didn't consume much. She eagerly downed 2 Cokes, reminiscent of another dinner I shared with her a lifetime ago. Staring at the second bottle, she chewed her lip, and I wondered if she was remembering the same pivotal night. The monsters she had faced that day were nothing compared to those I brought down on her this time. She didn't speak her thoughts and ate in silence, always keeping one hand on mine, looking away only to spear another tiny morsel. Unlike that evening over a year ago, she didn't pepper me with questions, though she seemed just as anxious. I wanted to ask what was bothering her, but didn't want to interrupt her abbreviated meal. Finally, she licked her lips, and I started to speak, but Alice interrupted.
"We should go,"
she said, quirking her eyebrow at me.
"You'll have her all to yourself soon."
The first leg of our journey was short and bumpy. Bella barely got settled before the pilot announced our descent into Rome. While her hands and eyes stayed locked with mine the entire trip, her expression remained guarded. Whenever the cabin shook, her grip tightened, and I would give her a reassuring smile. The pilots were well in control, and Alice saw nothing but a happy landing, when she was looking. My brother had taken center stage in Alice's concentration. His patience dwindling, Jasper had made a reservation on the next flight out of Fairbanks, but he wasn't planning on going to Seattle like he told Carlisle. He had booked a flight to Chicago instead, and planned to head east to find Alice, one way or another. Once he got on a plane, he'd be unreachable, and Alice was starting to panic.
"I have to call him. He doesn't know we're safe."
Without an onboard phone available, she fingered the inoperative cell phone in her pocket, regretting not calling Jasper from the airport in Florence.
"Maybe Rome?"
She saw us running through the airport, barely making our flight to Atlanta, and adjusted her plans once again.
"Just a few more minutes, Jazz, please,"
she silently begged. We dashed off the plane, hearing the final call for our connection. Bella struggled to keep up, clinging to my sleeve as I practically carried her through the quiet terminal. Breathing hard, she flopped into her assigned seat while I stowed her bag overhead. Maybe now she'd rest. The circles under her eyes had darkened another shade since we had left Volterra. Her alabaster skin contrasted with the purple, seeming to pale even more as I watched. Add a little sparkle, and she'd pass for a vampire. Bastard, I swore at myself. And I had thought myself above Aro. The truth was... No, I refused to acknowledge the truth. Not now. Not after she had nearly sacrificed everything on my behalf. Instead, I pretended that I wasn't that monster, and sat next to Bella, opening my hand to hers. She caught my gaze first, scrutinizing my eyes, my cheeks, my mouth. Her heart stuttered as she set her fiery fingers in my icy grasp. It took several seconds for the tension to ease, but then her eyes returned to mine, endless pools of warmth, and I eagerly drowned in their depths. As the plane angled up into the sky, Alice nearly ripped the airphone off the seat in front of her. Bella cocked her head, hearing my sister's frantic call. The phone rang only once.
"Jazz, stop! We're fine!"
The words flew by so fast, I had to concentrate to catch them. Alice. Even without Jasper's presence, I felt every bit of the fear, frustration, and overwhelming relief wrapped in his single word. "You're all right?"
"Yes,"
she said in a whoosh.
"We all are."
"How much longer?"
17 hours and 58 minutes,
she said, closing her eyes as the future solidified.
"Not long."
He sighed, clearly disagreeing. I was so worried.
"I know, Jazz. I'm sorry I didn't call earlier. I told you I'd get out."
She tried to make light of how close to death she had actually come. Jasper didn't respond for 5 full seconds, and Alice called his name, afraid she had lost the connection. Another exhale confirmed he was still there. "I know you lied to me," he whispered. Alice froze, surprised for once.
"He knew? Oh, no."
He continued, his voice soft and understanding. "And I know why you did." I wondered if he had guessed her reaction, or if his link to Alice was strong enough to cross this vast distance.
"Can you forgive me?"
She didn't look for an answer. Guilt had erased her desire to second-guess her mate. "Come home to me and find out." Neither Alice or I had any doubt that she'd be forgiven. As I tried to tune out the rest of their intimate conversation, I turned my focus back to the exhausted angel next to me. I dared not compare my lie to Alice's. Forgiveness would not come to me so easily. Instead, I lost myself in Bella's eyes, rejoicing in the light that shined brightly in their depths. A long blink reminded me that I should release her from my stare and let her sleep. Would she let herself drift off, now that we had left Italian soil for good? The answer was no. The first thing Bella did after the seatbelt sign was extinguished was press the attendant call button. Her first words since Florence were directed at the uniformed stranger.
"May I have a Coke, please? And can you leave the can?" "Of course. Anything for you, sir?"
The woman deliberately flipped her hair over her shoulder and broadened her smile. I shook my head, ignoring the attendant's unwanted attention. "Bella," I groaned. Eventually she would pass out from fatigue. Why was she fighting the inevitable? And I wanted nothing more than to cradle her while she slept, to protect her when she was her most vulnerable.
"I don't want to sleep,"
she said, shaking her head in defiance. I expected anger, disgust, but her voice faded.
"If I close my eyes now, I'll see things I don't want to see. I'll have nightmares."
Stunned, I had no response. So wrapped up in my own selfish desires, I'd completely missed the obvious. Bella feared not only nightmares of horrors that could be, I had given her memories of the most grisly kind. of things that were. On top of everything I had put her through, I had stolen one of the blessings of humanity from her, the peace of sleep. Would I ever bring her anything but pain? Would I be the one haunting her night terrors? Behind me, Alice overheard Bella's fears.
"She hasn't been sleeping well for a while, Edward."
The vision of Bella curled peacefully against me in her bed returned, distracting me before I could continue my self-flagellation.
"Now that you've come to your senses, I only see restful nights and happy days."
I snorted quietly, half expecting her to pass me a fortune cookie. For a moment, I seriously considered having her cliché prediction printed up and encapsulated in flour, sugar, and water. I'd only need a few minutes to place the order. Alice let out a quiet "ha ha" when she saw the box of confections being delivered to our front door by a human in a brown uniform. I immediately discarded the idea, earning a snort from the seat behind me. After warning Jasper about the wolves and Victoria, Alice asked for Carlyle. Curious, I spared enough attention to listen to my father's voice over the even thrumming of Bella's heart. Alice and Carlyle discussed how to handle our homecoming.
"Poor Charlie."
She let herself float into the future, and saw Bella's father tossing and turning in his bed, hours from now. Then the image of fingers dialing a phone shimmered over the scene. The area code was Seattle, and the hand belonged to Charlie. "Dave, do you still have that contact at the FBI?" he said into the receiver.
"Be sure to call Charlie early,"
Alice warned Carlyle. Over the phone, Carlyle's assent was less than enthusiastic. "Very well. Are you sure there isn't another way?"
"Carlyle's not happy about blaming you,"
Alice thought. She and Carlyle had gone round and round, trying to fabricate a believable story that fit with the few facts that Charlie had. Thinking we had moved to Southern California, Charlie would accept that Bella had gone there. As for Carlyle, and why he hadn't called Charlie sooner, they had taken Bella's policy of less is more to heart. Carlyle would pose a story that he and Esme had been out of town at a medical conference, and had been shocked to find Bella in their living room when they returned late last night. After questioning the three of us ad nauseum and getting no answers, he had made getting Bella home his highest priority, calling Charlie as early as was reasonable. Playing the irritated parent was a huge stretch for Carlyle, but Alice did her best to convince him that it was the only way to avoid unanswerable questions from Bella's father.
"How do you think Charlie would have felt if he found Edward in his house at 2 a.m?"
she asked when Carlyle had resisted. She didn't add the "especially after what he had done to her" that should have followed. I ducked my head in acknowledgment, knowing she'd see it over the top of the seat. He should blame me. This entire disastrous situation was my fault. Truthfully, Carlyle shouldn't even have to act the part of the disappointed parent. I'd more than earned his disfavor. With a little more coercion, Carlyle reluctantly agreed that an irate, uninformed response was appropriate, and would be purposefully vague, citing my insistence that getting Bella home was more important than an explanation. Charlie would be suspicious, but as a father of an equally stubborn teenager, Alice saw he would accept the story, for now. Just before ending the call, Carlyle cautiously asked if I would be staying after we delivered Bella home safely. His jubilance at Alice's assurance that I would remain both cheered and saddened me. Yet again, the man I revered was welcoming me back into his home, after a disastrously short-sighted decision on my part. His compassion knew no limits. Emmett's playful, "It's about time," and Esme's quiet, "This is where he belongs," echoed in the background, along with a faint sigh. Unlike her previous call, Rosalie was at a loss for words, it seemed. "Thank you, Alice. We'll be waiting at the airport," Carlyle said, his smile lingering in his voice. My parents' excitement at my return wouldn't be shared by Bella's father. I didn't need Alice to know that Charlie's reaction at my arrival would be beyond furious, bordering on violent. But her second sight confirmed my assumption. The fact that he wouldn't listen to anything I said wasn't much of a surprise either, but left us all waiting on what Bella would decide to tell him. I hoped I could be there when she dealt with her father, to take some, if not all, of the blame, but knew that was nigh on impossible. Charlie had to hear the truth from Bella alone, and would undoubtedly punish her for what was possibly the bravest thing she had ever done in her short life. My list of transgressions against such an innocent and selfless creature was endless. Her forgiveness surely wasn't as infinite.
"We'll see you all soon,"
Alice said brightly before hanging up. Bella's drink arrived, and after she had had a sip, I crooked a finger in her direction. Seeing that Bella would continue to refuse sleep, Alice had passed up on booking us roomy but individual first-class berths in favor of less private, side-by-side business-class seats. I had been more than happy that Bella was always within arm's reach, but she still wasn't close enough. The armrest between us was a mile wide if it was an inch, and I needed to feel her against me. When she wasn't in my arms, I had to remind myself she was real, that I wasn't hallucinating. She took another swig, then stood, eyeing the blanket I held open for her. There it was again, that almost pensive pause, as if she was expecting me to deliver a punchline. She swept her hair to the side, erasing the expression, and settling into my embrace with the lightness of a fluff of down. Her touch melted away my curiosity, warming the frozen lump in my chest that doubled as a heart. I drank in her closeness and feasted on her beauty as she stared at me, wide-eyed. She curled up in my lap, like the last 6 months didn't exist. I caught Bella's dainty fingers and brought her knuckles to my lips. She watched our hands raise, and her heart stuttered, causing one corner of my lip to creep up. This was exactly what I expected, and once again wished that my body was capable of responding in kind. The tiny V between her eyebrows reappeared when I let her hands fall back down to her lap, but it too vanished after I brushed it with my lips. Her scent rested on my tongue, sweet and delicious, but my greatest desire wasn't to feast, but to savor. Each molten swallow of unused venom became another layer of resolve, guaranteeing I'd never consume her blood again. I imagined the blistering in my throat becoming thick and calloused, just like the hands of a master craftsman. Athletes and artists alike fought constant injury and strain in order to indulge in what they loved. I was no different. The pain was trivial compared to the reward. Bella looked at me, her brown eyes scouring my face, her stare giving me imaginary butterfly kisses everywhere it roamed. She didn't speak, but seemed to read me like a fascinating book. Of course, I had stolen all her photos. No wonder she appeared to be seeing me for the first time. I shared the same awe as I looked down at her. Even though I had memorized every feature, down to each individual eyelash, my mind wasn't capable of recreating the beauty that was Bella. Nothing in nature or art could compare, and no one deserved her less. As if hearing my lament, her fingers wrapped around mine, rose petals clinging to steel. Contrary to any fear I might have seen in her eyes, her grip told me that she had no intention of letting me go, at least until I'd apologized. Selfishly, cowardly, I held my tongue. Bella, too, remained speechless. Perhaps she was too tired to indulge in curiosity, or perhaps she had already learned too much. Now that my lie had been exposed, maybe she wouldn't believe another word I said. And yet, her eyes never left mine. Could she see the truth in them? And so we sat, wordlessly, relearning each other's features, dazzling each other, she'd say. I'd gladly welcome an eternity of this. Eternity lasted 45 minutes. Bella's mouth turned down, and she readjusted herself on my lap. 2 minutes later, she repeated the process. Are you cold? Let me get you an extra. She grabbed my hand as it rose to the orange call button, her deliberate touch sending a thrill through me, even after so many hours of constant contact.
No, I'm fine.
She must have read the disbelief on my face, because she sighed and glanced at the back of the cabin. Slowly, she slid off me.
I'll be right back.
All that caffeine. I hated the way it affected Bella. I'd rather she slept peacefully in my arms than have to leave me to use the restroom. I started to rise, but she shook her head and rested a shaking hand on my arm as she passed.
I'll only be a minute. Just don't go anywhere, okay?
Her frown ruined the joke. I held my tongue. There was a time when she'd most certainly point out that the necessity for both Coke and restrooms could be alleviated with a single lethal nip. Rather than instigating that argument, I nodded and prepared myself for the 60 seconds of hell her absence would bring. The memory of how empty my life had been without her lurked at the edges of my consciousness, ready to engulf me in blackness. She's alive. She's safe, I told myself, willing myself to stay seated. Bella looked back at me with a darkness that made my chest ache. She paused next to Alice's seat and touched my sister's shoulder. Her expression softened into one of deep trust and sincere appreciation. "Thank you," she whispered fiercely. The finality of the words struck a cold chord. Alice gently squeezed her hand.
"You're welcome, Bella. But it's me who should be thanking you."
Bella stared intently at my sister, her eyes narrowing slightly, like she wanted to ask something, but then changed her mind with a nod. She pulled her hand away slowly, lovingly, then sped to the back of the cabin. I had just realized that I had yet to thank my sister when she appeared in the seat Bella had just vacated. The door to the toilet clicked shut, and Alice spoke.
"Esme's going to be so glad to see you."
She showed me our mother's glowing face, golden eyes sparkling with unsheddable tears, waiting for us at the airport. But it was Alice's smile that tore at my chest. Even though I had known Alice would try to stop me, the fact that she had been willing to leave her mate and risk her life to do it was just starting to sink in. "Alice," I mumbled, gratitude and remorse grappling inside me, but neither "I'm sorry" nor "thank you" made its way across my lips. She tried not to remember the dastardly vision I had given her, but it crept into her mind. In that once possible future, I didn't cry out when the guards descended on me, vaporizing me in seconds. It was Alice that screamed in her thoughts as she watched me die. She gave the back of my hair a playful yank, dispelling the disturbing image.
"You were the one that showed me how pliable the future is."
Her thoughts filled with the sight of me sucking the venom out of Bella's hand, an option she had been unable to foresee.
"And I wasn't letting you get away from me that easily,"
she thought, squeezing me tight.
"You're my favorite brother."
Her smile widened, exposing every one of her tiny poisonous teeth, and she put her hand in mine. I know you'd do the same for me.
Embarrassed, I wasn't sure I shared her faith in my ability to capitulate, should our places be reversed. Would I leave Bella behind and forfeit my life to save Alice? I thought of Bella, safely tucked away at home, and Alice, facing down a menacing Felix. No, I couldn't let my sister meet an end such as that. I would fight to save her, given the choice. Alice winked, seeing my indecision fade. Finally, I found the words I was searching for, inadequate though they may be. You were right, you know. I should have listened to you. She waited patiently as I made the first of many painful apologies. I'm so sorry.
Yes, you should have listened,
she said sternly, but reached up and pinched my cheek.
Remember that,
she commanded, humor dancing in her golden eyes. I waited, but she didn't speak again, contenting herself with watching Esme finalize the move back to Forks. That was it? No rebuke? I had no doubt that Emmett and Jasper had some retribution for me planned, and that it would quite possibly last for years. Carlyle and Esme had already forgiven me, and I could care less what Rosalie thought. But Alice, she wasn't one to just let something go without fully expressing her views on the subject. You're not mad at me? I asked. Considering the tongue-lashing I had received for leaving Bella, I expected Alice to be berating me both mentally and vocally for trying to do away with myself.
For leaving? Of course. But I'm over it. Don't ever think of doing it again, though. I'll drag you back by your hair next time.
She imagined the scene, my arms crossed and feet dragging as she towed me through the forest, running me into every tree and over every fallen log she could find, her musical laugh adding to the absurdity of the scene. I chuckled. I'll remember that. Not that I could ever leave Bella. Even if she sent me away, I'd find a way to watch over her. But where was the lecture about the stupidity in trying to take my own life? You aren't upset about my excursion? She reached for a magazine.
No,
she said, a little too casually.
I've always known you'd do that.
I listened to her thoughts, expecting her to show me the first time she had seen me decide that I couldn't live without Bella. But all I saw were her memories of me watching Bella across the Forks High School cafeteria last year. I don't understand. How did you know? She sighed.
Edward, I've known since you first saved her life that you and Bella were meant to be together, and I know what it's like to find your mate. It's so much more than just love. It's a wholeness, an overwhelming satisfaction of completion. It is the reason for being. Losing Bella after experiencing that burst of life was devastating.
Her black hair flashed in the dim light as it tried to keep up with the swift motion of her head whipping back and forth.
You're not the only one whose life depends on another.
A cloud of velvet smoke filled her mind, but it wasn't my funeral pyre. Jasper's future followed a similar path, should Alice fail to escape Italy alive. She flipped the pages, but ignored the pictures, willing herself to see his true future, one that had him racing through the Canadian wilderness in my Volvo. Her courage was extraordinary. I'm sorry, I repeated.
Just know that I understand. Whether it's due to our diet or our morals, it's clear that our family mates for life.
Her thoughts drifted.
Victoria clearly doesn't feel the same way.
The redhead's future was a jumble of trees, cars, and occasional bloody victims. Vicious, unplanned, feral. Victoria. The thought of her being capable of loving anything was lost on me. But I wondered if Alice's hypothesis could be true. A different set of red eyes filled my mental vision. What had Marcus been like before he had lost his mate? Could he have been on the path that led to gold rather than crimson? Alice shifted gears abruptly and gave me a painless slap. The sound echoed through the cabin, causing several people to stir, yet settle back into sleep.
But you're right. I should be mad at you. You should have called me after talking to Rosalie.
I gritted my teeth. Blessed with a self-sacrificing sister, I was equally cursed with an irritatingly self-serving one. If Rosalie had just kept her perfect little mouth shut, none of this would have happened.
Let me tell you about a little story about a pot and a kettle.
Fine. I, too, was selfish. But calling me 27 times just to rub in my nose the fact that Bella had killed herself. The armrest cracked in my hand. No. Rosalie was one person to whom I owed nothing. No apology, no gratitude, no forgiveness. If it weren't for Emmett, I'd—
Edward?
Alice asked, gently pulling on my arm. Forcing myself to breathe the stale air, I let her extricate my hand from the twisted plastic. Yes, I should have called you, I admitted. But I couldn't think any more. Rosalie's news had been the last straw. She had given me the worst possible reason to call Bella, and though I told myself I would have hung up and hid myself again had Bella answered, I knew that hanging up would have been the last thing I would have done. At the sound of her voice, I would have started back to Washington at light speed, without disconnecting the call if possible. Alice slid her fingers into mine, preventing me from damaging any more of the airplane.
I get it. You can't survive without her.
She nudged my shoulder.
If only you had listened to me in the first place.
I'll pay more attention from now on. Promise. I ruffled her dark hair and managed a small grin. Thank you for saving us, sis. She gripped my arm hard enough to bend titanium.
Any time.
The sound of running water in the restroom drew Alice to her feet.
Welcome home,
she said, planting a kiss on my cheek before dancing back to her seat. The sweet fragrance of soap preceded Bella's reappearance at my side. Before she could cross in front of me to her seat, I caught her hand, inviting her to sit with me. The pause was 1/10 of a second longer this time. Her eyes filled with the longing I couldn't place. Without a word, she released my fingers and settled herself against me. I snatched the blanket I had tossed aside and draped it over her, but she freed her hands, resting them on top. Alice busied herself analyzing the historical accuracy of the apparel in the in-flight movie.
I miss men's hats, she lamented. The wide ties and monstrous lapels I could do without.
I tuned her out, relegating her musings to the background hum of the human minds around us. Bella snuggled into the crook of my arm and resumed her silent stare at my face. As on the flight from Florence, she was clearly occupied with something. She gnawed her lip or creased her brow, then suddenly erased the expression as if she had been caught in a bluff. I wanted more than anything to ask her what she was thinking, but cowardice was a formidable foe. For all her hesitation and elusive weariness, she was still my Bella. I lifted my hand to her face, and she pressed it to her cheek, sandwiching my fingers in her human warmth. She sighed, and her eyes fluttered closed peacefully, but she quickly recovered and snapped them open again. "Would you like to watch a movie?" I asked, wondering if she was already bored with me.
"No."
Her lip disappeared between her teeth for a split second, and she dropped her hand back to her lap.
"But if you want to," she mumbled.
"And take my eyes away from her face?"
"Don't be silly."
I traced the grimace that formed on her lips with the tip of my finger, and was rewarded with a tiny gasp, soft as velvet. I leaned forward an inch, and her grimace immediately tightened under my touch. Even without speaking, I clearly heard the "please don't" that screamed from Bella's eyes. Gone was the eager, hungry look she had worn so many times in my presence. Fear resided there now, and I quickly kissed her forehead instead. Patience, I told myself. She had every right, every reason to withhold her thoughts and her kiss from me after what I had done. The fact that she was here in my arms was more than a miracle, and I let my head lay back against the seat, content to enjoy anything and everything she'd give me. Her expression softened, and she freed her hand from mine. Trembling, she cautiously raised it to my cheek. Softer than a summer's breeze, but with the pure energy of an arc welder, her skin pulsed with life. Her eyes widened as she circled my chin, then followed the tiny indentation below my lip. Now it was my turn to inhale sharply. As pink tinted her cheek, one corner of her mouth momentarily curved up. Like so many of her expressions, it too faded into an unnatural blankness. The question I was dying to ask stuck in my throat. What right did I have to interrogate her? She should be grilling me, and I should be on my knees begging her forgiveness. Apologizing to Alice hadn't been that difficult, and I tried to form the sentence to begin my confession to Bella. It wasn't the dearth of words that kept me silent, but the sheer enormity of what I had to repent that kept me from speaking. For failing to stop Victoria, for giving you cause to jump off a cliff, for leading you to immortality's black heart in Italy, for literally throwing you to the wolves, for the lie, the biggest lie, for purposefully breaking your heart, for loving you too much and yet not enough. So many things I had to pay penance for. How could I start to apologize? Where could I start? The list of transgressions continued to grow as I drank in Bella's beauty. The vision Alice showed Aro had illustrated my greatest of sins. That I was actually capable of taking not only Bella's humanity, but her soul. Though she had said many times how ending her life was what she wanted, the naked truth was that I wanted it even more. I could resist no longer, and touched her face again, copying her movements. My finger followed her jaw and lingered on her chin. Unconsciously, I found myself tracing the subtle dimple centered below her lips, down and around the right side of her chin, down again, around the left, the symbol for infinity. In that instant, I saw Alice's vision again. Bella lifting her chin, her small, victorious smile, as I leaned down to her throat, the rush of her blood flowing just beneath her delicate skin, a kiss, then a bite, one last taste, then the screams started. Seeing that I could actually bring myself to do such an abominable act shamed me in unspeakable ways. Imagining her eyes fluttering open to reveal red, not brown, both disgusted and thrilled me. I couldn't deny that Bella would make a formidable vampire. With the fortitude she constantly displayed as human amplified, I would pity the creature, mortal or undead, criminal or Volturi, who dared to cross her. Her unyielding mind must translate into some equally strong talent. I couldn't begin to fathom how that would manifest. She would be even more beautiful, more independent, more courageous. Running a finger through the hair surrounding her human face, I wanted to slap myself. How arrogant I was. Bella already was more than I could ever be. To think that by making her more like me was improving what was already perfect was ridiculously conceited. And damning her to my own monstrous existence would only prove how monstrous I truly was. How could I deprive her of the reward that she, above all others, deserved? Peace, sleep, rest, not to mention paradise. No, fate could not twist my logic or desire to rip Bella from the destiny she had more than earned. I smoothed her eyebrow, vowing that her irises would remain the color of melted chocolate, regardless of my fantasies. She would have as long and as full a life as I could give her, if she'd have me.